Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. A few weeks ago at San Diego Comic Con 2023, I had the pleasure of hosting the Doctor Who comics panel and chatting with JODY HOUSER, the long-time author of many of Titan Comics' wonderful Doctor Who comic books. We talked about the history of JODY writing Doctor Who, about her current series Doomsday, available right now, about the future of Doctor Who. We had a special guest appearance by the mighty Dan Slott about his new comic book series. And we also talked about JODY's wonderful, fascinating and inspiring career. Enjoy. And somebody I've introduced many times is our special guest today, JODY HOUSER. Now, I'm going to sit down in a second, but before we get going, do we have any Doctor Who fans in the audience? Somebody told me a second ago this was the Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea panel, and I was like, what? You know, that can't be right. So it's lovely to have you all here. We all love Doctor Who at Titan, as you know. I was in the audience on my great-grandmother's knee when the first episode aired in 1963. I'm about a month old with the show. That's a real story. I should have brought that picture because I actually have it. And we are privileged and proud to keep the Doctor Who flame burning in the comic space for these many years. But the reason we've been able to do that is that we have worked with the exceptional talent of JODY HOUSER. When I say we've worked with the exceptional talent of JODY HOUSER, JODY has created this comic book universe for us, and we've just sat along and looked at it in awe and amazement and enjoyment. So please, another round of applause for JODY. How have you been, mate?
Pretty good. It's great being back in San Diego.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? Like, so we've been at Titan. We've been away for 4 years. So this is our first time back.
Yeah, I was here last year, but this year is my 15th San Diego Comic Con. So starting to rack up the numbers there.
Right on. So let's start by talking about your current Doctor Who project.
Yes, Doctor Who Doomsday, which ties into the big multi-platform event with the Assassin Doom. And if you're not familiar, there's an assassin named Doom. And she travels through time and space, much like the Doctor does, except she murders people for money, you know, as an assassin does. And she has death on her tail. She has 24 hours to find the Doctor and hopefully not die. But each hour she still has a job to do. And if anyone, how many people here read the Missy miniseries that we did a little while back?
Yes.
So we did for the anniversary of the Master, we did a miniseries with Missy toward the end of her time with the 12th Doctor when she was calling herself Doctor Who for fun. So we sort of explored that more and had Missy posing as the Doctor, teaming up with the Delgado Master, who she treated like a spoiled child, essentially. So we sort of brought that version of Missy back. So Missy, pretending to be the Doctor, runs into this assassin who's looking for the Doctor. The assassin who knows the Doctor says, "You're not the Doctor." And Missy's like, "I will burn down the universe to prove that I am," but with a better accent. So it's a 2-issue series. The first issue's out and the second issue comes out next Wednesday. And it's just a lot of fun with if you like snarky ladies traveling through time and destroying things in their path, you'll enjoy it.
All of which are some of my favourite things. JODY, you've had a long history of creating Doctor Who comics for us. Can you take us through that journey?
Oh gosh, I think it was 2017 when I was first asked if I was interested in writing Doctor Who comics for Titan. And we actually started writing our first story arc before the first episodes with 13 aired. And so we were given sort of like redacted sections of script, like here's a little bit of the Doctor, here's a little bit of Ryan, here's a little bit of Yaz, here's a little bit of Graham. Okay, you know everything you need to know, right? And it's like, okay. So we were working out the characters before we really got to see the characters in action, and like the trailer came out, it was like, okay, good, we get to hear them, that helps a lot. But it was a lot of fun, and I've had people ask me, like, why isn't Graham saying Doc in your first issues? And it was like, 'cause we didn't know that was a thing yet, because we hadn't seen anything. So yeah, we sort of started, I think the earliest I've worked on pretty much any of the licensed properties I've worked on, compared to when the source material was coming out.
Sure. And what were the sequence of the books? For those of you who haven't read them, and you should, because they're awesome, what's the sequence of the books you created for us?
We did a 12-issue series with 13 and her companions that sort of were loosely interlinked. Gosh, I don't remember all the trade names off the top of my head. There's a lot of them now. It was A New Beginning was, I think, the first 4-issue story arc. Hidden Human History was the second, and then third, which I should remember, introduced the Corsair, who people might know as having been referenced in The Doctor's Wife, but not a character we'd actually got to see on screen before. So, weird tangent, but my boyfriend ran a Doctor Who RPG at Geek and Sundry, and before I knew him, I loved RPGs and Doctor Who, so I reached out and asked if I could guest, and I ended up playing a version of the Corsair on that show. So once I started writing Doctor Who comics, I was like, I have to do a Corsair. And there was some back and forth until I was able to do that, but I was very excited. And then those issues were the first digital comics that Neil Gaiman bought because he wanted to see what we did with his character, and he loved it. So if it has a thumbs up from Neil, you should check it out.
See, this is a brilliant story that folds out with many dimensions.
Yes.
Why I like it.
And so after the 13th Doctor sort of first year ended, we started doing some team ups. So 13 teamed up with the 10th Doctor, and they sort of dealt with what happened when the 10th Doctor and Martha were trapped in the past by the Weeping Angels. And then that sort of broke history because, you know, paradox, fun times. So then they had to team up again to repair the damage they did, because after that event, 13 and the fam went back and found that Earth had been conquered by aliens in their time, and that wasn't right, so they had to find where they damaged the timeline and take care of that. There was the Missy miniseries I talked a bit about before. There was Time Lord Victorious, which tied into the event. We did a Christmas special. We did a series that I think is sort of the most fun in terms of fallout. In the second 10 and 13 team up, we sort of ended the story with an extra Rose Tyler, which sometimes happens when you're dealing with time travel, alternate universe shenanigans, and build rules to make one character's death really sad. We realize that the other characters are still going to be around. So we did a story that sort of what happened with that Rose Tyler, the original Rose Tyler, the 8th Doctor, and the 11th Doctor. So the Doctors before and after Rose. And the extra Rose Tyler, who grew up on an Earth where she was a revolutionary and trying to lead the human resistance to take their planet back, she just sort of went out, helped other planets do the same thing, and accidentally built an empire. So that was the Empire of the Wolf, which is the name of that story arc. Doctor Who Origins, which covered the Fugitive Doctor. So we dealt with how she ended up maybe learning that Gallifrey and the Council weren't as squeaky clean as she thought, and maybe it would be better to run away and have her own adventures instead.
That's one of my favourites, Jodie. Can you talk a bit about your wonderful art team on the book?
Oh yes, the artist I've worked with primarily on almost all of those series is Roberta Imbrata, who is an Italian artist. She's lovely, and she's just really good at keeping everything in her style, but sort of capturing the mannerisms. Like, she can have 13 do her little nose crinkle, but it still just looks like Roberta's art. So it's like, with licensed comics, there's sort of like a fine line you want to tread, because you don't necessarily want to make it look like you just traced a photo, but you want all the characters to be recognizable as the actors too, especially since a lot of times the artists have to go through approvals from the actors. So you have to make it look like them, but like the best version of them, and that's one of the reasons I'm glad I'm a writer and I don't have to deal with that, because that just sounds terrifying. I mean, imagine an actor that you love being like, you drew me wrong, and No. Yes, and then we've had a few colors. The one who we worked with the most is Erin, who I think did everything up until Doctor Who Origins, and they are actually big in the TTRPG space. So they've been working on the Critical Role comics that I've also been working on, but not together. So hopefully we'll get to collaborate on another universe too.
That's just brilliant. What was your everybody's got a different answer to this story. What was your original introduction to Doctor Who?
I'm one of those weird people who my introduction to Doctor Who was the 8th Doctor movie. Because I was aware of Doctor Who because I had friends who had grown up watching it on PBS, but I hadn't seen any of it. And then I saw commercials for this movie back when people watched TV and commercials and stuff. And I was like, oh, it's that alien show. Sure, I'll check it out. And I'm not going to say it was a great movie, but Paul is like such a good doctor, and that was a great introduction to the character. So when the new series launched over here on, I guess it started on Sci-Fi first, I started watching, and I blame Paul Cornell for me being the Doctor Who fan that I am, because I always say I'm not a huge fan of a show until it makes me cry. And Father's Day was the first episode that made me cry. So if you like my comics, you can blame Paul Cornell for that.
Also a fine comic book writer himself. So that's interesting. The 8th Doctor movie is so interesting on so many levels, I think, because Paul McGann's a great Doctor, and of course he's only really been seen on screen twice, 3 times maybe, lots of audio adventures. But he's had such an interesting pop culture adjacent career, because of course he's one of the 2 stars of With Nail and I. If you've never seen that film, thoroughly recommend that you see it. It's an amazing piece of work. And also in England there's a very famous show which stars Sean Bean, set in the Napoleonic Wars, about an English infantryman called Sharp, who's a kind of like low-born officer, but he's very working class. But when they originally shot the pilot for that with Paul McGann, who fell off a horse and broke his leg.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and so they ended up casting Sean Bean on the Who. So he's been around all of these things. But I think there's a lot. I really like the regeneration scenes in that movie.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people I've heard sort of say, like, why would you start this movie that's mostly for new people and just show an old guy to start? But also I just think it's hilarious that the Doctor comes to America and the first thing that happens is he gets shot right now. It's really terrible, but funny.
And Eric Roberts gives his usually audacious performance as the Master.
Yeah, it wasn't until years later I found out, his connection to Julia Roberts, and it just made it funnier. I think that he played the Master. I don't know.
No, it's undoubtedly true. And for all these years you've spent writing the Doctor on the comic book page, what are your thoughts about the show and what it says to us and how the character speaks to us?
I think the thing that I really loved about 13's era is the focus on the companions, because it was just sort of a bigger group of companions than we've seen most of the time, and the fact that they became her fam, and she called them her fam, and it was sort of a different flavor of the companion relationship than we've seen, and I had a lot of fun playing with that in the comics, but it's also a challenge because that is a lot of characters, and when you start crossing over with other Doctors and other companions and aliens get involved, it's like finding room for everyone to sort of have their shining moment in each issue. So I sort of tried to lean into different aspects, and like especially with Yaz and her sort of law enforcement background, we sort of played with that as much as we could. But yeah, it was a challenge, but again, I really loved all the characters, and Graham and Ryan's relationship as it developed on the show, we didn't specifically point that out in the comic, but we sort of tried to follow that path so you could sort of get a feeling for at what stage their comfort level for each other had reached.
And outside of the Doctors that you've been directly involved with writing the exploits of, who's your favourite Doctor?
I always say that my favorite Doctor is whatever Doctor I watch last, because that's the one that comes to mind first. If you had to point a gun at me and I'm going to stop talking about guns, it's getting weird. Probably 10, just because there's something about the way David Tennant does like the Doctor brainstorming and getting super excited and just like pacing around and grabbing his head and explaining. It's like something about that just feels like my writing process when it's like hit on a really good like pace. So it's a very weirdly specific thing, but just something about the way he thinks through things feels like the way I think through things when I'm writing sometimes. So that's sort of why he's the Doctor I connected with the most.
Yeah, we've got any other Tennant fans in the audience? It was ever thus. Who's excited for the 14? Cool. Can we take a step back and talk about the current project? And what the route was, you were talking about the premise, and what is it like working in one of those transmedia, thought pieces almost, storylines?
I think I've been sort of lucky on the comic side because both with Time Lord, Victorious, and Doomsday, the comics sort of came fairly early on. So I was more given the premise and not having to necessarily reference what was happening in other media. It was just, it can work as a standalone story, which I like because it's like, here's Doom, here's what Doom is like, but go. You don't have to be constrained by the events that are happening in other places, because it's more like, maybe it needs to end here, but the middle part is all whatever you want to do. So yeah, I think for a transmedia project like this, on both books, we had a lot of freedom.
Yeah, and how aware are you of the elements of it?
To an extent, mostly because I try to not pay attention to it as much as I can, because when you're in the process of coming up with the adventures, you don't want to be too influenced by what the other writers and the other media are doing. So it was kind of like, this actually is a little similar to this other thing, so just have Doom reference like, this again, sort of deal. But other than that, it's like I tried to keep myself a little siloed from everything else, just so it can be its own thing.
And Jody, moving forward, is this my phone? Oh no, it's all right, we're all good. Is it yours? I had that happen once, and it was my mum ringing up to say happy birthday. So it wasn't my birthday. And so, what if you weren't conditioned by the assignment we gave you, or the views he gave you, what era of the Doctor or what characters would you like to write about in the future that you haven't had the chance to do so?
Donna is one that one of the companions that's one of my very favorites who I haven't gotten to write yet, and she's just so snarky, and as I discussed with Doomsday, clearly like writing snarky ladies in weird time periods, so she would be great. And I'd love to bring the Corsair back, because that was just such a fun character to play with. I kind of wrote the Corsair as if she was that friend of yours from college that you meet up with years later, and you sort of become responsible and grown up, and they really haven't. And it's like, and plus the Doctor also knows what ends up happening to the Corsair and has to try to not let her in on her impending doom, basically. So yeah, I would like to do more with the Corsair, because it's just like such a fun character concept. And the Doctor just doesn't have a lot of old friends. Oh, that's the name of the trade, old friends.
Yeah, right on, got it. And Jenny, what else are you working on at the moment?
Oh gosh,
So you spent a lot of plates.
Yes, I thought it was coming out this week, but I think it got delayed. I'm actually doing an issue for the new What If Dark series for Marvel. What If Spider-Gwen, and it's basically, for people who know the story, the night Gwen Stacy died, spoilers, Gwen Stacy died. What if Gwen Stacy survived the bridge, but Spider-Man didn't? And I actually co-wrote it with Jerry Conway, who is legendary comic writer, co-created The Punisher, but also wrote the original The Night Gwen Stacy Died. So it was very cool on the 50th anniversary of that story to go back with the original writer and write a different version of the events.
Also wrote many hours on the show for Law and Order, right?
Yes, a lot of TV writing too. I'm trying to remember what's been announced that I can talk about. I don't think a release date's been announced yet, but there is another Critical Role series that was nodded to in our last miniseries. And also the graphic novel for Molly Mock-Tealy from Mighty Nine just came out fairly recently. I had a one-shot from Return of the Jedi's anniversary series come out that focuses on the Empire and essentially the little people who get pulled up into the Empire's industry and try to survive it and do or do not. There's a Stranger Things miniseries called Tales from Hawkins coming out that is one-shot stories, like an anthology style, focusing on different characters and different elements of the world that we haven't really seen explored. And our next issue coming out focuses on Robin. So that's fun. Assassin's Apprentice from Dark Horse, which is a adaptation of the fantasy series. I feel like there's more stuff that I'm forgetting.
The great thing, I knew this was coming, is the reason I asked Jacob's question, we asked Jacob the question, what are you working on? You get what would be another person's complete resume, all in one go. And those are just your upcoming projects, right?
Yeah, that's the one that just got announced is I'm adapting the Obi-Wan TV series to comics for Marvel. So it's going to be it is a 6-issue series. Each issue is one of the episodes of the show. And if you know anything about comics pacing, that is a lot of story to fit into a comic. So it's a challenge, it's fun, so check it out when that drops in the fall.
I've got two specific things I want to ask you about from your back catalogue. One of which is quite Anglo-centric, which is Moneypenny.
Yes.
Now, I love that. So can you talk a bit about how that came to be? What it's like?
Oh yes. So that was one of the earlier license books I worked on, and the James Bond license has been held by Dynamite, and they were doing not quite the movie universe and not quite the books and sort of like their own thing. So they asked me to write a one-shot with Moneypenny. And she does have a similar background that we've seen in the movies where she was an agent before she took a desk job. So I got to do a sort of narrative that was looking back at her childhood and what made her want to go into the profession she was in, and then the modern day where she's trying to work out a terrorist threat. And that was just a lot of fun to play with, and it was a self-contained story, which was those are always just really fun to do because you have a lot more free reign without having to connect to other events that are going on. But yeah, that was just it was weird getting a letter back that's like, the owners of James Bond have approved your story, and I was still kind of new to doing licensed books, and I was like, that's crazy because this has been around a long time, and like they said this is okay, and okay. And I think I was one of the first women to write a James Bond tie-in video, which still seems weird, but...
You absolutely right. Yeah, so right. And the interesting thing about the James Bond organisation, which we work with on a number of occasions also, is the Fleming estate, it's the Fleming family. It's still I think it's Ian Fleming's granddaughter.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, it was signed Fleming, the approval. And
his DNA is shot all the way through. It's an amazing experience working with them. And the other thing is, to be more science fictional, is you're involved with the X-Files.
Yes.
Personal favourite.
That was with IDW. That was a really fun project we did. It was called X-Files Origins, and it was actually a flip book. So the story was on one side, then you flip it over, and it would be the other story. And it was Scully the summer when she was 13 years old, and Mulder the summer when he was 13 years old. And so because of the age difference, they're not at the same time, but they have connective tissue in terms of some of the background characters. And originally they asked me if I wanted to write the Scully story, and I grew up as an X-Files fan. I was kind of like, I'm not sure. And then they came back and asked if I wanted to write the Mulder story, and I'm like, oh, Mulder's family when it's falling apart right after Sam disappeared? Yes. So yeah, it's Fox like right after he's lost his sister, and he's sort of going through that, and there's like weird stuff happening, and he's riding bikes through the woods with his friends, which if you know anything about comic artists is like a nightmare to have to draw. We did 2 series, and the joke was if we did a third one, the monsters were going to be bicycles riding bicycles, just to like torture the artists. But Kristen Milio, who is actually now drawing the Star Trek Lower Decks comic, was the artist I worked with on the Mulder side.
Yeah, that is a lovely book. What we're going to do now, we're going to port back into Doctor Who and talk a little bit about our next Doctor Who project, on which we're working with a man named Dan Slott. So if any of you are aware of Dan Slott, the mighty Dan Slott, superstar Marvel writer, very nice person, co-creator of the Spider-Verse, and massive Doctor Who fan. And at Titan, we've known Dan for a long time, and we've known that he's wanted to work on Doctor Who for a long time. But his Marvel contract for a long time did not allow him to do that. And when he re-upped last time around, they cut out a clause that allowed Dan to work with us just on Doctor Who and then on with Marvel for everything else. So we've got about 4 minutes or so of Dan talking about his upcoming Doctor Who project. So here it comes right now.
Hi, Doctor Who panel. This is Dan Slott. I'm a writer of comic books. You've probably never heard of me. But I'm going to be writing some Doctor Who comics for Titan. And I'm here to answer any of your questions. Anyone have any questions? You in the blue. No, I'm kidding. This is all pre-recorded. I can't see any of you. Do whatever you want. I'm coming to you from the past. And this comics will appear to you in the future. It's very Doctor Who. It's very four-dimensional. It's all, woo! You're going to love it. We have our original cover by Christopher Jones. And we have our special direct market cover, ooh, by Adam Hughes, ooh. And inside you're going to find all new stories starring the 10th Doctor and Martha, and a backup with the 9th Doctor and Rose. And this is me getting to live out all my fantasies of working on Doctor Who. Ah! And if you like it, we'll make more. So there you go. When I was a kid, my family moved to England, and I got to start watching Doctor Who with the Leisure Hive. And I stayed here all the way in the UK up until Vengeance on Varos. That is my history with Doctor Who. But one of the things I was doing was I was running out as a little kid and going to Forbidden Planet and buying all the Target novelizations, because as a comic book nerd, I knew there was continuity and I had to understand it all. And I was determined. So I started with An Unearthly Child, following the first Doctor, and I read all the way up through the Key of Time and caught up. So I knew all my Doctor Who back then, and I was the happiest adult in the world when Russell T Davies and Julie Gardner and all those wonderful people at the BBC brought back the Doctor with Christopher Eccleston, and I've been a huge fan. It's been my favorite TV show ever, and this has been the dream. And I've been bugging Titan Comics forever to do some Doctor Who. So this is it. If you read our comic coming out in October, right before the big new David Tennant specials, you will get to see stories by me and Christopher Jones and artist Matthew Dow Smith. And our backup is by the lovely Mike Collins, who is a actual storyboard artist for Doctor Who forever. And he's still there. He's never leaving. He is immortal. He is a Time Lord. Yeah, so there you go. It's tons of adventure, lots of fun. Me getting a chance to, like, when I wrote this story, there's 2 stories. One's called Firelight and one called Rhyme or Reason. And when I wrote these, I wrote them as if they were never going to let me write Doctor Who again. So everything in the world is in this. Everything I've ever wanted to do in Doctor Who, if I only had one shot, is in this book. You're going to see classic villains. You're going to see new Who villains. You're going to see I get to make up villains with Chris Jones. I get to do it all. There's going to be cameos. All kinds of wonderful things in the Whoniverse are going to show up in this. But if you've never read an issue before, you're fine. You can jump in with this too. This could be your introduction to Doctor Who, as it should be, from an American. That was me sipping some tea.
Mighty Dan Slott. So, true story, we recorded that in what we call our Forbidden Planet TV green room in London, which looks an awful lot like our collectibles stock room. So if you took the banners down, you'd see, if you're ever familiar with any of our Titan Doctor Who collectibles, Dan was sitting in front of about 2,000 of those. And the mighty Willow Mullane, our PR manager, sat there with the beard and the glasses in the corner. Say hello to Will, please. The mighty Will. So Will was there. It was Dan's birthday. We'd just given him a big gooey chocolate cake. And when we did the first take on this, because I did some interviews with him, we had to clean all the chocolate out of our teeth and do it again. And Forbidden Planet TV, which I mentioned before, is our YouTube channel. You'll find on that YouTube channel many conversations between myself and Jody and the history of her Doctor Who comics. And you find numerous conversations with myself and Dan talking about his whole career and what he plans to do. But now is the time for some questions for Jody. And what I have by way of a treat is at Titan booth 5537, we have a bunch of amazing Doctor Who collectibles and a bunch of amazing t-shirts. And I brought some t-shirts with me, so everyone who gets to ask a question receives a t-shirt. Okay.
What about those of us who answer questions?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, well, you get something even more special. So I should mention the other epic thing we have at the Titan booth. And this is what I was alluding to. We only have it at the Titan booth. Is we produced an enamel pin set that contains 13 enamel TARDISes in a facsimile box of the TARDIS itself, with magnetic doors that open. It's only been produced for San Diego. We have a pink Barbie TARDIS, aka the 7th Doctor TARDIS that is in there. You can only get that in this set. We don't even have it in the London set. There are only 100 units of it, and we've blown through many of them, but they're still available today at booth 5537. So there we go. So, without further ado, and please step to the mic if you have a question. Thanks so much. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to ask about a doctor in the house, because you guys didn't really get to that in your conversation, and I was really hoping that talk a little bit about that and plans for that.
Oh, that's the Doomsday that we were talking about. So yeah, the actual name for the issue is a doctor in the house, riffing on, is there a doctor in the house? And Missy goes, hee, and Doom goes, no. So yes, that's the name of it. I've just been calling it Doomsday because that's the overall event name. It has actually both on the cover. I actually do have both issues down at my artist alley table, a few sets left. So, but yes, it is.
What number is that table, Joe?
Oh, it is GG20, I believe. They might have moved me down a little bit, but I'm in the same row.
I will fight the crowd.
Thank you so much. Can we get a t-shirt? There you go. That's an Impossible Planet t-shirt. Excellent outfit, mate. Very good.
Well, thank you. It was supposed to be the Mandalorian, but my mom has the helmet.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent work, Mom. Also, I love your t-shirt. Very good. Yes. You never do.
So, I'm going to be honest, I actually had never read any of the comics before, but I just thought this panel sounded interesting. So, you're the writer, and I was wondering, where should I start first?
I would say you could start with A New Beginning is the first story arc that we did with the 13th Doctor. That sort of kicked off the whole story of everything we did. But I say if you're also a really big 10th Doctor fan, you can jump on to the first crossover, which was called Alternating Currents was the second one. Too many trades, I can't remember all the names. But yes, the first crossover event with 13 and 10 is also a good place to jump on. And then some of the stories like the Missy story or standalone, the Doctor Who Origins with the Fugitive Doctor standalone, so you can kind of read those whenever.
Thanks so much.
Hi, Jody. I started collecting comics with your first Doctor Who comics, so thank you for the wonderful stories. I wanted to ask if the Corsair and Missy had an adventure, what's the absolute worst thing they could do?
Oh, there's so many terrible things they could do. I like that they're, the Corsair is more the party person who will just sort of cause chaos by accident, but has a good heart and does try to do the right thing, whereas Missy is the opposite, but pretending to be that. So I think it would be really, really interesting to sort of see those two. I think it would be far more chaos than even Doom, because Doom is on a set schedule, she has a set job list, so she's very goal-oriented, whereas the Corsair is just let's party and steal stuff.
Hi Hi, thank you so much for doing this. This is really great. So I'm a big Whovian, and I guess Black Whovian, I don't know. Anyway, my question is, I was super excited when I saw that they were getting like Donna Noble back, and bringing back the 10th Doctor, and I thought to myself, and I was telling my husband, I was like, this works, because obviously the actors have aged, but with this whole way that they're bringing it back in, it's fine. I did not realize that the actors had to approve the art. I know you're coming from this from a writer standpoint, but I'm just so curious. Have you heard about the actors' feedback? Because obviously this is going to be at some point in the comics. Like, are they okay with a period order in the comics?
I haven't heard anything specifically about Doctor Who, and I'm not sure, like I've mostly heard that about actors on the American side, so I don't know if there's differences with the comics and the actors on the British side.
Okay.
But I mean, before we had Roberta, we had Rachel Stott doing art, and they have different styles, but I think both of them really have, like what I was saying, they capture the essence of the character without looking photorealistic. So honestly, I feel like the actors were hopefully really okay with it, because I think the characters look great, the art looked great, they look great. So.
I've actually got a little bit of an answer as well, because one of the things we do at Titan is we also owned by the same group as Titan. There's a retail store in the UK called Forbidden Planet, which is like the biggest comic book chain in like Europe, yeah. And it's got a massive store in London, so we hold a lot of events with the Doctor actors. And to a person, they have always been utterly charmed by the appearance in the comic book. So I've spoken to Capaldi about it, and he absolutely loved his portrayal. I know that Jodie did.
The one thing I can say is I know Capaldi did fan art for Rachel Stott, who drew the 12th Doctor comics. He actually sent her fan art of himself as a thank you for her comics art. So yeah, I think it's still her pinned post on Twitter if you look, even though it's been years now. But like, he's actually a really good artist. At one point, I was hoping we could get him to do a cover for the 13th Doctor to like, it's like he's giving his sort of like nod to the next incarnation. But we sadly needed to work that out. But it would have been
Brilliant. Would have been great. Thank you very much. Can we get a team?
Hi there. Thanks to both of you for sharing your time today. I just had a question in terms of shading into the last question, kind of vetting that as a writer in the creative process. I can only imagine the joy and terror you must feel on every page of either scripting or adapting these comics. Does the BBC have like a thou shalt not with all 15 incarnations of the Doctor? Or is it more you write thou shalt and then wait for that kind of editing feedback? How much freedom do you feel you have?
I would say more of the latter. Like, I think the most in terms of notes like that I've gotten was actually in the Fugitive Doctor story, because we had a sort of companion for the Fugitive Doctor who was like the newly minted agent, fresh from the academy, along with sort of the veteran. And her name was Taslo, and she was a little bit, I don't want to say she was murder happy, but she was just kind of like, we've been sent to do a job, we got to do it. If that involves stabbing people, I'm here with my knife. And so we had a scene where she stabbed and killed an alien. And the note we got back was, that's too violent. Can the knife be like electric instead? And I'm like, so instead of stabbing someone so they bleed, we stab someone so they get electrocuted, but it cauterizes that. That sounds worse to me, but okay. So yeah, we've had like little notes more like that are just like sort of pulled back on the violence in a way that's more violent.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Good question.
I really love the Tale of Two Doctors series that you did. If you were to write another crossover, which two doctors would you do?
I feel like, because I've done so many now, I feel like we haven't seen Judy's Doctor yet, but I kind of feel like I'd really love to see the 9th Doctor meet the 15th Doctor, or even maybe the 13th Doctor, to just sort of see how far the Doctor's come since the war, because I feel like the 9th Doctor, everything was still so raw, and that was such an influence on his character, and I feel like it would almost just be a kindness to let him see that he does heal eventually to an extent, and he does get back to the core of the Doctor they know. So that I'd sort of like to do a story like that, a little bit more of a melancholy crossover, I think.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question about, well, similar to that gentleman, about your relationship with the TV production company, whether you try to push the story in a certain way and the TV series just goes in a completely opposite direction, or vice versa, and how you work out the relationship, or it's okay, this is not canon, this is, how does that work out?
Well, I think Paul Cornell is the one who has a whole talk about this, about how there is no such thing as Doctor Who canon, and that nothing is canon, so therefore everything is canon. But yeah, I think Doctor Who, more than pretty much anything else I work on, like anything can sort of you can just sort of write it off as wibbly wobbly, and it's fine. But I mean, most of the time it's, there were a couple of instances where we were writing the comics before the scripts for the next series came in, and it was like, oh, there's actually an episode that's set in a really similar time period. Could you shift that over? So it does tend to be like, if we're doing something that's directly in conflict, they'll make sure that we steer around that. But I think for the most part, it's like, as long as it all seems like it kind of fits together, it's good. But again, yeah, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any storylines within Classic Who or New Who that you would really like to pick up? Like you mentioned, the fourth Priscilla thing and Empire Wolf kind of seems like Bad Wolf type stuff.
I know they did elsewhere, but Jenny, I feel like, would be a lot of fun to play with. I sort of just like the weirder offshoots of characters connected to the Doctor that we didn't get to see much of. And I'd love to do something with other incarnations of the Master, because I got to play with 2 of them, but there are so many good ones, and that would be a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Hi. Hello. Who is your favorite sidekick?
Sorry?
Who was your favorite sidekick?
My favorite psychic?
Yeah, in comic.
Oh, in comics. Oh, sidekick. I still kind of feel like Donna is I don't know, she was so funny, but she had so much heart too, and it's nice seeing someone who was strong enough to serve as the Doctor's conscience instead of just being along for the ride.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I don't have a lot of experience with microphones. Sorry. So you kind of talked about this a little earlier when you were answering somebody else's question, but I was wondering, the 9th story always felt kind of unresolved to me. So and I know you've given a lot of thought to everything because of your intense portfolio. Is there any situation you would want to put the 9th Doctor in that we could potentially see ever? Or because you were saying something about actors and stuff, so I was like, well, I know Christopher Eccleston has kind of distanced himself. So is he an option?
I mean, I think he is, because as Dan was saying, the 9th Doctor is going to be in the annual that Dan is writing in a backup story. So I think that's pretty much an option that's on the plate. It's just not something that we've gotten to yet. I'm hoping someday, yeah. But yeah, I think, like I said, and we would sort of have to tease out to see who else was available we could use for sure. And sometimes there's things you do want to reference, like, hey, we haven't seen these monsters in a while. Can you work them in? So there does tend to be that to play around with, but I think, yeah, something that does sort of is a little bit maybe of a healing moment for him would be my first choice to dive into.
And also, I have to say that 9th Doctor is my favourite Doctor. He's from the north of England, which I'm from, and I have another answer to that question. I'm not going to say it while I'm on this microphone. So if you come to booth 5537, I'll tell you what I think. Okay? And I'm afraid you have the last T-shirt. We're out, but we've got time for more questions. We've only got 1 T-shirt. Yeah. Sorry about the lack of T-shirts.
It's okay, no worries. So, I never read the comics, but I do love Doctor Who, so thank you so much for sharing. And I apologize if you've already written this, but I know the 12th Doctor played a character before he was actually the 12th Doctor. So when you said that you were in the What If, that you were writing the What If character, I was ever wondering if you have already kind of wondered if you went back to that and explained that situation and how his character was in that episode. I don't know if that makes sense.
Are you talking about the Torchwood?
They went back in time.
No, you're talking about the
Peter Capaldi,
Pompeii.
Yes, Pompeii.
Yeah,
Yes.
because it's funny, being the Doctor is like the third character he's actually played in the universe. I mean, I feel like they did do a little bit of a nod to that in the show itself, and they sort of implied that it was because it was a face he had seen before, and it was a face that had stuck with
That's
him.
right, yeah.
But it would have been interesting because we do know that family was saved, so it would have been fun to see the 12th Doctor cross back over and meet them again. And it's like, why do you look like me? This is weird. Yeah. That's actually a really fun story idea. But yeah, that's not something I've written yet, but who knows?
Well, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Do you know if the BBC is planning to do anything with the Doctor's daughter?
That I don't know. I think there is Big Finish, right?
Yeah, it's audio adventures.
Yeah, they have almost any character you can think of in Doctor Who, Big Finish has done something with. The breadth of this storytelling that they've done is just astonishing. So I highly recommend checking out their stuff.
And the addendum I'd say is, of course, the actor who plays the Doctor's daughter couldn't be more networked in to Doctor Who mythology, sort of being both the father and the partner of the Doctor. So you're definitely going to hear from that character in some way, shape or form again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What was it? It's like the Doctor's daughter and the Doctor's daughter?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely spot on.
Or no, the Doctor's daughter played the Doctor's daughter and had the Doctor's daughter.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you're somebody who came up and got a T-shirt and I was just picking those randomly and it was wildly the wrong size for you, come and see me at 5537 because I can remember all your faces and I'll flip them. And the last two ladies, if you want to come and see me at 5537, I'll sort you out with a T-shirt. Okay? We're wrapping up towards the end of this panel at speed, but I'd like you all to give a very warm round of applause to the mightily talented Jody Houser.
I will be, shortly after this panel, I'll be back in Artist Alley at GG20, and I'll be there every day of the con for probably at least 3 or 4 hours. The staff there will be able to tell you when I'll be back if I'm not there, and I don't think I have all the Doctor Who trades, but I do have most of them. So if you haven't checked them out yet, and there's any of the stories that sound cool, swing by, because we might have a copy of it.
And you'll sign for those.
Oh yes, and anything you buy includes signature.
And if you're desperate for further Doctor Who goodness, Doctor Who goodies, what I would suggest you do is go and see my friend Corin Hollifield, who runs the Doctor Who booth. They've got a bunch of great stuff. Or come and see us at Titan Entertainment booth 5537, because we've got a whole bunch of different stuff that they do not have. And that's 5537 at the entrance hall, so including that wonderful pin set. A couple more people I'm going to shout out to. We've got one of our favourite Doctor Who designers in the audience, Mr. Kelly Yates. Could you just stand up, Kelly? Give this man a round of applause. If you've ever bought a Doctor Who Kawaii Titan or seen some of the great T-shirts that the BBC sell, it's Kelly who designs all of those. He's a fantastic illustrator. The man in the corner of the beard next to the camera, that's our PR manager at Titan, Mr. Will O'Mullane, who arranged all this. Good man for Will. Please, a very big thank you to our lovely friends at Comic-Con. Thank you very much for all your hard work. Thanks, guys. Give them a round of applause because they do such a massive amount. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you at the booth and we'll see you at Jody's booth. Thank you. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.